good afternoon, and good day wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download,
which is the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live, now officially syndicated on the RBGN Internet Radio Network. Oh, there was something else as well, wasn't there? Damn.
Well done.
Now globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio.
I'll
get you there.
Really cool.
Today, we're talking about category creation. We have a special guest, Leah Parisyan, to help us with the discussion. Longtime marketing professional and co-host of Marketers with SaaS, Leah brings a wealth of experience in content strategy and brand development. But before we bring Leah on, let's go around and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience ping a friend? Have them join us. We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience. Audience participation is highly encouraged. Right. So with that, introductions. Adam, would you kick us off, please?
Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Gray. I'm one of the co-founders of DLA Ignite. And I say this every week, don't I? I'm really looking forward to today's show. I am really looking forward to today's show. If Tim were here, he would say, I'm famous for writing the book Social Selling, and he has to say that because of what you're going to say a little bit later. But I'm just pleased to be here.
Excellent. Well, we're pleased to have you here, Adam. Thank you. Bertrand.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Bertrand Godillot. I am the founder and managing partner of Odysseus & Co., a very proud DLA Ignite partner. And I'm glad to be here as well. And on top of that, I just learned that I may not be the only French on that call.
Excellent. Welcome. Tim.
Hello. Yes, my name's Tim Hughes. I'm the founder and CEO of DLA Ignite. Really pleased to be here. And I'm the famous for writing the book Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers.
Great having you here, Tim. Thank you. And myself, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results. I too am a proud DLA Ignite partner, and I'm not famous for writing anything.
Yes.
Yet. All right. As I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Leah Parisyan. From poetry to powerful branding, her journey reveals the intricacies of creating compelling narratives and innovative go-to-market strategies. Let's bring her on. Leah, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Leah, let's start with this. How bad did I butcher your name?
It was perfect. It was very, very good.
Excellent.
It was very, very good.
Good morning and welcome to you, Leah. Let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what brings you here today.
Sure. So originally I was a poetry major. I really thought I would teach poetry, French symbolism, and Dante, but that did not work out because I graduated at the peak of the recession and had to make some money. So that's how I got into documentary filmmaking, writing subtitles at the bottom of the films. And then I got into PR as a result of that, and then worked in the manufacturing marine industries, writing very technical manuals, and then finally found my way into romance copy, eventually settling in on B2B copywriting and content strategy. So, and a little bit of retail sprinkled here and there, working in a spice factory. So you could say a diverse background.
A lot of parallels between romance writing and B2B writing, right?
Yes, very, very much so.
Excellent. So, Leah, let's start with a foundational question.
Sure.
What do you mean by category creation?
Yeah, Great question. So it's different than brand. Brand is how you present yourself to the world. I think it's your wrapping, your container, how you speak. Category is the problem you solve. So, what is the big, hairy problem that you're uniquely positioned to solve and through what mechanism? So, I suggest starting with the problem and then figuring out how you'd like to present the problem to the world.
And you were saying that's different from brand. Tell me a little bit
Yes.
more about that. How so?
Yeah. So brand, I think of more of the aesthetic, how things are being communicated to the market, how when somebody's thumb scrolling, they see you, they recognize you, they instantly know who you are and what your value proposition is. Category is the problem you solve. So for example, Uber is a good example, right? They took a really difficult problem, hailing a cab, and made it automated, streamlined, and um, then became sort of this transportation and even food delivery app now. So when you have a category to and own it, you can also find new streams for innovation. So that's how I differentiate. One is a problem, the other is more of a wrapping or an aesthetic and a tone.
So, is it difficult for businesses to identify what that category is? Because one of the things that strikes me is that so few organizations have really clearly nailed how they tell the story around what it is that they do. So, lots of them have invested in a nice logo, nice copywriting, and a brand manual that says, you know, we're cheerful but serious, or whatever it is that it says. But very few of them communicate the what they solve, how they solve it, and why I should care about that in a way that an idiot like me can understand it. So how do businesses go about laying that out?
That's a really good observation, and it's true. It's an area that's sort of skipped over, glossed over. People go to market and they wonder why this great looking brand or snazzy copy does not convert, and it's because they skip that really critical step. I think of it as I don't know if you've seen the series The Expanse, when there's that really morbid scene where he's sort of like taking the human body apart and studying how it's put together. I recommend the same approach. It's like a tinkerer. You need to figure out how the quantum bits, connect with one another in order to grasp the whole picture. So that's my recommendation there is really get down to what is your product? What does it do? What does it connect with? The same can apply to a service. But if you don't understand the individual parts, you can't communicate your category and your unique differentiators.
So I guess following on from that, how do businesses start to tackle this problem? Because it it strikes me that you start a business because you're passionate about something. There's loads of books like the E-Myth and that sort of thing where the woman bakes cakes and that's all she wants to do. So she starts her own cake shop and realizes that in fact she's now got to do invoicing and finance and stock taking and all of this other stuff that is not core to what she wants. So I've started a business manufacturing plastic things, and I know everything there is to know about plastics and manufacturing and everything there is to know about all of the technical side of things. And I hire in people, but they're either dyed in the wool marketers who know all about kind of the pretty logos and stuff, or they're technical people who are just like me. So there's actually very few opportunities, I think, in business for the business to take a step back and think about this from the customer's perspective. Because I know everything about manufacturing. You don't know anything about manufacturing. So we're speaking a different language, really. So how does a business go about unpicking that and starting to understand that category, that thing that they're trying to solve in a way that the customer can engage with it?
Great that you asked. We're actually doing a listening tour, as Jim Tintaro coined that phrase. I don't know if anybody else did, but it's the first time that I've ever heard anybody, a CEO or anyone use it. And what we're doing is we're interviewing customers. We're interviewing lookalike customers, so prospects in the verticals that are closely aligned to our ICP. We're also talking to technologists. We're talking to uh, people in the industry that have launched SaaS products before. And we're really trying to Do expectation tests, which is one of my favorite type of testing, is show them a website, show them a one sheet, a sales sheet, and ask them, what is it that you think that we do, without giving them any other context. The answer, the value you get in that question is unparalleled, because you sort of see what are the patterns, or is there a pattern? If there isn't, that's a problem too, because you're inconsistent in how you present yourself. So that's one of the ways we do it, is a listening tour, talking to your ICP, talking to industry heads, right, for your product or service. And then we segment them into friendlies versus like sort of cold contacts, and take that data and try to understand why are some of these misconceptions arising, if there are any.
Mm. I mean, it must be quite a difficult process to go through, because inevitably the company is wedded to the stuff that it's produced that it thinks is a really good idea. So
Yes.
Tim and I worked at a big SaaS company before we started DLA Ignite, and it always makes me laugh that we used to do journey mapping. It's customer journey mapping, and it's never customer journey mapping. It's always your sales mapping. It's about when do I need to show you this brochure, or when do I need to offer you this workshop, or in order to move you along to the next stage. Very rarely did anybody ever take the time and trouble to ask the client or the prospect what they needed at this particular point. And my point is, so how do you take that on the chin? I've spent ages working on our brochure, and I showed it to Tim's partner, and she said, "Oh, so you're an accountancy practice, are you?" And I'm like, no, I'm joking, but you know what I mean. It's like you have to be prepared to be very pragmatic and prepared to take some fairly fierce criticism potentially, don't you?
Oh yes, and we've gotten some, and but if you're not willing to take feedback in and grow, then you're in the wrong industry, and you're not qualified to lead, in my opinion. You need, I mean, there's also ways to deliver feedback in a way that's constructive, positive, and not, just like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. So it is a two-way street, but if you have a message in market and it's not converting, and the metrics tell you that it's not converting, then it's time to really roll up your sleeves and do the dirty and difficult work. And it's even at that point, it's hard to convince people. They're convinced it's a color or a word, or, the landing page layout. And it's like, well, it's been 4 years of this iteration. It's clearly something deeper than a color or a word.
Yeah, just a quick question on this.
Sure.
Is there a good time to create a category? In today's very changing environment, I suspect that you may have to change or slightly twist your category time after time, and maybe in some occasions I'm just thinking about going basically crossing the chasm is probably also a time where you need to redesign all of that. What's your experience in that content? I mean, on that specific topic.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why if the problem's changing, right, it's probably time to reassess your category. If are developing a bunch of features, speaking to customers, and then you get to the source of a different problem than the one you originally started to solve, then it might be the right time to shift categories. And it's really difficult now too, because you have the emergence of AI, the popularity. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of potential, right? And then the other mistake I've seen people make is they enter the market without sufficient market research and are creating a tool that is solving a problem that's already been fixed in a way that's not unique enough to be a differentiator. Like, you've already lost footing by not doing your homework properly. And that's a tough thing to do too. And it's something that should happen simultaneously.
But how about if you're? So I get that that's a real possibility, that you're developing something, and by the time you take it to market, the problem doesn't exist anymore because things have changed or there's an
Yeah.
incumbent solution. But how about if you've got something new? So not so much Uber, but say Facebook, for example.
Right.
So nobody knows they need Facebook until Facebook launch and all of your friends are on it, and then you realize that you have to be on it as well. So how do you deal with this idea that you're breaking a path through complete virgin snow? There are no other people around you. You're doing something completely alien, and to quote Henry Ford, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And so I think often we see that though, don't we? And potentially your customer feedback isn't going to help steer you because they'll just go, well, what's the point? And the point is less about the fantastic thing I've created and more about you, the customer's inability to grasp what it is that I've created. How do we deal with that?
That's a really good question. So I'm currently working on a social impact data and AI platform. And what it does is it switches from selling motions from pre-distribution to redistribution, meaning that like impact funding comes from a budget set at the beginning instead of it being a budget at the end. And it really changes how business contributes to social impact. And it's a hard concept for people to grasp because it's literally a new business model and then a new category of tool. So that is the big hairy problem I'm solving at the moment is like, how do you introduce a concept that has 140 searches really a month? And then how do you convey the value of that as a competitive differentiator, as a business driver? And then educate the market on how that enriched data flows into their existing tools uh, and for what use cases and benefits. So it is really breaking it down step by step. And the listening tours are helpful, though. Even if the customers aren't ready for it, you get a sense of why they're not ready for it. And you get a sense of the objections. So then when you're doing that product development area, you're like, well, these are the objections. How can we smooth it over? Is it a fear of, I don't know how to use this? Is it a fear of, I don't know where the budget is coming from? Is it a fear of, I don't know how my sales incentive is going to be calculated? So there's just as much value in the customer's inability to break through and see your vision as there is having a vision, I think.
I think I can see the answer to this, but I'd really like to get your take. You
Sure.
mentioned 140 searches. And
Yeah.
In terms of category creation, that's really the challenge, isn't it? Nobody knows you exist. Isn't it just easier to pick an existing category and say, we do that too?
Yes and no, because whoever has the foothold, the king or the queen in that category, has the lion's share of the market, right? And do you want to be an imitator or do you want to break new ground and create a new category and own it, right? And then potentially there's more opportunity for revenue streams spin outs from that new category. It's hard. You sort of see it with like large conglomerates, legacy brands, and that's why you're seeing demergers in some of these bigger brands like Unilever with their ice cream business, is that they realize that they can't be everything to everyone. So really niching down, and because there are so many solutions out there and there are very specific pain points, if your solution can integrate in an existing flow and doesn't create more bloat to tech stack, I believe I think it's micro solutioning the future. And that's kind of the way I'm seeing business and my field going. I don't know if you've observed that as well.
You caught my attention at revenue spinouts. Can you give some examples of what you mean by that?
Let me see. Think of a good example. So maybe this isn't the best example, but it's the first that comes to mind. But Kroger, for instance, has a really big analytics and data arm that collects data from their vast footprint. And that's supermarkets for anyone who doesn't know. That data could be monetized, right? If and turned into products. So that, you're having all of this consumer shopping behavior that can then be spun out into a different product, right? You have this first party loyalty data. So, whether you want to do a consulting arm, whether you want to build an app, whether you want to sell that data, it just opens many more possibilities. And they're sort of the people I think of when I think grocery tech, and sort of that early analytics.
What are some of the secrets to successful category creation in these already highly competitive markets?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think you need to really look at what you're doing. At one of the organizations I was at, they were trying to do too much, right? Are you diluting your category by attempting to serve too many verticals or offer too many products? So, really looking at, what is your niche? What is your area of focus? And creating a category around that focus, because it's hard to create a category when you're scattered, also from a resources development, personnel perspective. Um, if you don't have that focus, it's really difficult to create a category. But once your category is cemented, then you can have opportunities to sort of branch out into these little like tributaries. So I think most people start at this like delta with all of these tributaries instead of the opposite of starting with the singularity and sort of branching out as they've cemented their category. Um, and in terms of how to do that effectively, uh, like again, like the person taking apart a toy car or radio, it's really looking at experience, it's looking at your offering, it's looking at your customer and figuring out, where is the friction, where is the opportunity, and how is what we're building solving problems for the people we've identified as our target. And it's not like sexy work, it's time consuming, but it's worthwhile.
And when we know what our category is, what do we do with it?
Oh, wow. It is tough. So, there's the search front. If you're owning a new term, you want to populate that term and grow that term, but whether that's social impact business for us, social impact marketing, for it would be leadership too, like going on podcasts, introducing the new business model, going on events like this and sort of spreading awareness about this new way of doing business. It's a multi-front, multi-channel approach. Instagram, YouTube, having awareness that this is a problem, right? The problem that we're solving isn't necessarily social impact. It's how do you build relationships? How do you cement relationships in an era where there's so much competition and noise? We're solving a relationship problem. The way we do that is through data, AI, and the benefit of doing business this way is that it impacts the world. So again, it took us a lot of rounds of interviews, listening tours, et cetera, to figure out, okay, we have all this cool stuff, but what if we had to boil it down, are we actually solving? And that is the hardest question to answer. And it takes a lot of focus, a lot of paper or digital paper being crumpled and deleted and redlined. And I think most businesses don't pursue this because it is challenging a lot of your assumptions and really like starting from scratch in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the difference between the problem that I want to solve and the problem that you need me to solve.
Exactly.
And businesses focus, individuals, we all focus on what we want to be doing, really. And, we see that when we're working with clients, we explain very clearly what they need to do. And they don't want to do it because they want to do what they want to do sometimes. This is the
Yes.
individuals within the business. Well, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather just focus on this. Okay, but that's not going to solve the problem that you have. So I must say, when Rob said, "Go on, introduce yourself, Leah," and you started to talk, you had me at poetry major.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that before we get back into business type stuff.
Oh, Yeah, I'm actually a creative writing major with poetry as my focus. I've always loved words, loved language, and I decided to pursue creative writing after environmental studies because it was too difficult. I had to go to three different schools to get my degree. So 40 credits in, I'm like, what will get me out of school the fastest and what do I like? So that's how I ended up there. And I absolutely loved it because I got put into this class as a transfer student. It was in Italian, which I don't speak. Um, and it was reading Purgatorio in Italian with an English companion. And it was sort of a translation focus. And we had to write like 100-page thesis at the end of this. So I'm like, oh dear God, what am I going to write about? So I focused on one verb, scianti, which means schism. And I based my whole thesis on that. And I'm like, I hope he buys this load of crap because I don't know. I'm like pulling it out of every direction, but it was based on like Dante's exile and how frequent that word showed up because when he wrote it, he was in like a very negative headspace, a lot of digs for his political rival. So it ended up being a really good piece and almost got me a trip to Italy, but I couldn't go because I had to work. But that's kind of how I got really into analysis was not through data, but through words, through syllables, through commas. And I think poetry does real wonders for the brain because it's microanalysis. It's like, is there what's the theme? How's the structure? Why are the words chosen in this order? What is the context of the writer? I really do think people in technology should study the arts. It enriches your ability to connect the dots. I know I'm doing like my little PSA here, but I don't know if you found that experience as well, like having an arts or a philosophy or a music background. How has that helped you in your careers?
I don't have an arts background. I have
Okay.
an appreciation for it.
You do have an
An
art.
art history
You
class.
do have an art
That counts.
background because mathematics is pure maths is an art, isn't it?
Can
That's
be.
a language unto itself, most definitely. But I don't know if it's necessarily art. I suppose it can be if it's applied in certain ways. But really, that's what I wanted to ask you when we started talking about the poetry. How does a background in the arts influence business strategy? Beyond, oh, I hope he buys this BS. I can see the business application of that. But
Um,
beyond that,
Yeah, it wasn't just poetry. Like I was one of those kids that had no clue what they wanted to do. I've taken Etruscan history, I've taken, national park management, you name it. I think diversity of thought and really connecting the dots, seeing things through your own filter, but then being able to step out and see it through another analytical lens. From like colonial lit, putting yourself in like John Winthrop's shoes, like what was going on when he wrote that. So it teaches you empathy because you need to understand the source text in order to have a perspective. And I think it's the same with business, whether you're reading customer reviews, watching videos, understanding who that person is, what they do, what matters to them, what is their aspiration, and how can you be the Virgil to their Dante in the story. Like that is a really valuable skill I picked up studying poetry.
I think that the answer is one of passion.
Yeah.
So even though you love your job and it's really interesting, when you started speaking about poetry, you became a different person. And I think that that's true for all of us. We all, if you get to our sort of age and you have to be doing something that you love doing, and we all love doing what it is that we're doing. But we have other stuff that really fires our imagination, and that we find is the key to unlocking people's excitement in what it is that you do. You've got a new product. If you're not passionate about it, no one else is going to be passionate about it. So your copywriting must help you to help clients to unlock that passion that they have for what it is that they do.
Yes, absolutely. And I also did a lot of interviews. I used to write for magazines, like digital publications. So the hardest thing is people think they have nothing unique to say or they have no unique perspective. And I think that's so like sad that that's a a belief. So I'll sit down and I won't even ask them about the product. I'll say like, you know, what made you get into this business? Did you study something else? What were you passionate about? What are your interests? So getting to know them on a human level and then seeing, what motivated somebody to pursue this business, this idea, and taking those currents and infusing it so that passion shines through in the writing. It's like, for example, our person was a surfer who saw issues with the Monica Bay and how polluted it was, and that's sort of that undercurrent that motivated him, this passion for the earth, this passion for leaving it better than he found it. And whether that's in technology, nonprofit, or whatever manifestation, that's that driving engine. And that was a really good observation that you had is passion, right? It's like digging and finding that. Sometimes it's buried really deep or you're not aware of it.
Very much so.
So there is a if anyone's got is doing a startup, there's an amazing book
Ooh.
called The Mum Test, and Rob Fitzpatrick has written a number of these books, and he writes them deliberately short. And it's the mum test because he said if you ever do a startup, the first person you ask is your mum. So, for example, say you're going to create plastic buckets using Adam's example. You'll go to your mum and you'll say, I'm going to create some plastic buckets. And she says, yeah, isn't that a good idea? Wow, that'll be fantastic. You'll be the king or queen of plastic buckets. You won't get the right answer that you want.
Well, what you need, you'll get the answer you want, not the answer you need.
Yeah. So what happens is that he takes you through a journey of how you go about asking questions to people about what it is that you want to do and why you want to do it. And part of that is to come up and understand the category that you want to work in. I mean, there was an announcement this week that there are now 14,000 Martech products. Wow. I mean, there must be some duplication in there.
No, but mine is really good. Mine is different.
Well, I think how many of those 14,000 do you remember, right? Those would be probably the category, resting on their laurels type people. But I thought when you said the mom test, I thought of the grandmother test with like user experience and interfaces, but equally valid. Yeah.
Equally valid. Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
What's the grandmother test?
Can your grandparent use the phone or the product? Industrial designers use it a lot. Product designers like physical, if they can't figure it out, it should be relatively easy. Are we being mindful of the size of text on the screen, button placement, things of that nature? So my father-in-law is an industrial designer, and he always is assessing forks and tines and things like that everywhere we go, and it's funny to see that it still like carries through pretty much every interaction he has with a physical object.
So if a business isn't getting the traction that it needs, and it's been down all of these different marketing solutions, so they've redesigned their logo, they've rewritten their brochure, they've redesigned their website with fantastic search engine optimization, elegant new navigation, or whatever it is that they've claimed they've done. And they realize that the problem is more fundamental than that. They're selling a product that people either can't understand or don't know they need, or whatever it may be. What's their next step? Because one of the things that we say when we're talking to a client is, if we're trying to show them how to generate more pipeline, they're not going to listen to anything we say if they have lots of pipeline. There has to be a pain there for them to want to move. So a company is looking at their strategy and they're thinking, we're trying all of this stuff and it simply isn't working. We're not able to crack this particular problem. what do they need to start doing?
So in this scenario, they have pipeline or they don't?
Let's assume they haven't. Let's assume that they're consistent with all of their messaging. They've tried logo redesigns, they've tried rebranding, they've gone to a new PR agency, they've tried pay-per-click out, they've done everything that their chartered marketer has told them that they should do. And I'm not damning chartered marketers here. And the sales team are facing the same challenges that every other sales team is, and no one wants to talk to them. So they're relying on putting a product in the marketplace and having people go, oh, that's interesting, I'd like to know more about that, as most businesses have to at some level. But that simply isn't happening. They're going to events and people are walking past their stand. They're placing adverts and people are flicking past the adverts. They're active on LinkedIn, but people are not engaging with their content because no matter how good the content is. Where do they go to try to tackle this problem? Because that's something that we see a lot of in the marketplace, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that my first step would be to understand if they have users, how are users using it? Are they sticky? What is adoption like? Are they, what does their retention cycle look like? I would look internal first and see what is that journey looking like? Are people using the tool? How are they using the tool? And then getting a baseline of that, maybe that would reveal where the shortcoming is in the messaging. Like maybe people are just using the tool or it's not serving their needs. I would start with product and retention and adoption stats and see like what's happening. The same thing with a service. Are they renewing? Are they leaving decent C stats, scores, customer satisfaction scores? What do their reviews look like? To get a sense of like what could potentially be wrong diagnoses. The other thing too is like, are they being too salesy in their messaging? Do they have industry experts that are putting their thought leadership out in the market? And I hate that word, but like their perspective in the market. That's what I would look at is first product, diagnose the problems with that, and then potentially look at, are they being too salesy instead of inspirational?
I think it's quite interesting because you made that point a number of times during our discussion, and I just find quite interesting the fact that actually the ones who know best what you're doing as a business are your customers, and therefore it should be your primary source of information about what you do. I just find it interesting because it's almost working the other way around, right?
Yes, it's not intuitive.
How many marketers talk to their customers?
Not many, and even higher up, I'd even say some product people don't, which blows my mind. I mean, how do you not? But and then it's how do you talk to them, right? Do you lead them with questions? I mean, I sit in a lot of these, lots of leading questions, why questions, which are always not good because it puts people's defenses up. What questions? How questions? Observing somebody doing something versus somebody telling you something. So there's a real art to customer research, user research, and I think the companies that have these second reincarnations and are successful realize that that's a critical ingredient to go to market messaging, category creation, all of that, product development. And it used to be a bigger thing, like in my career in the 2010s, 2015s, like user research was a pretty big part, especially in the larger enterprises. I've seen it shrink because everybody's working on these accelerated timelines, right? But they're putting things into market that aren't necessarily aligned with what the customers are, just for the haste of getting there first. And it's like, well, you got there. Nobody wants what you're offering. So maybe you rushed it a bit too much. So it's just like in life, like you need to slow down in order to perceive the value and get rid of that narrow tunnel vision you have and get a broader view of what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, customers, everybody, they think that they're right, don't they?
Yes.
So I don't need to check with my customers, because what do they know? I know the answers here. And actually, I think everybody is guilty of that to a certain extent, aren't they? Both personally and in business. And I think that one of the things that we see, and we often drum it in when we're coaching people, is that whether you like it is irrelevant. It's whether or not your audience likes it that's relevant. And be really pragmatic about this. I've written the best post ever, and everybody has ignored it. And then I've written a quick thing that I've knocked out and published, and loads of people have liked it. Well, that tells me what my audience are going to consume. And that kind of pragmatism is so vital, isn't it? So how do organizations and the people within them be more pragmatic about understanding what's working and what isn't, rather than just assume, I know best, we're going to do it my way?
Yeah, data, especially with certain personalities, really opens those conversations. So if you're going, it shouldn't just be opinion, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, you collect both sides of house and you present it like this is our engagement metrics, this is, our pipeline growth, et cetera, retention rates. And then you can say, like, this is how I'm diagnosing the problem. Like in a human body, it might be hypertension, right? To sort of build that narrative of like, there is a problem, right? And then I would also ask them to say, well, what are your goals in, the next 6 months, a year? How is what we've done so far supported those goals, and get their take on it? And I think when you ask that question, many of them will be like, well, we haven't supported our goals because of X, Y, and Z. It's like they know the answer to the test. They just need to be asked the test question a little differently. Um, so
You
that would be,
mentioned
yes.
being too salesy.
Yeah.
But I have a quota I have to sell. What should
Yeah.
I be doing instead?
Um, you know, so the best salespeople are like pain point solvers, right? They understand the person, what is really that person's problem, their aspiration, and they lead with that. They're not just like, hey, product in your face, they're just like, um, you know, are you struggling to stand out in a tough market? Are you finding it harder and harder to get a growing set of tasks done? Are you finding it difficult to communicate with your team? So, sort of touching on that empathy before ever mentioning a solution or a product. So, it's really training salespeople to lead with heart. And then you can sort of show them your solution. But I think you have to make it drive that you understand their problem first. And that's how you avoid, in my mind, being very salesy.
But do you understand my problem? I have to make quota.
Yeah, well, what are some of the challenges in hitting that quota? What has been some of your experiences and getting asked, if that's the question they lead with, try to get to the bottom of it. Why, are you meeting quota? Have you met quota in the past? What has changed? And I think people will open up when you're curious about their experience instead of just trying to push your story.
Yeah.
I've seen comments on LinkedIn where people have said, "Yeah, but sales have got a sale, and marketing has got a market."
Yeah, I mean, you're still doing that function. It's just doing it in a different way, right? There are many ways, right? There are different sales methodologies. This is just another one of those, right? And with any salesperson or marketer too, you have to keep testing, A/B testing, really taking time to analyze what's working and what isn't. I think a lot of people skip that over, don't run tests long enough, or don't run any tests, right? For example, we did an A/B campaign. We tested a 2 hour, 1 hour, 3 hour. Then we did a headline having one variable or two variables at most tested. So there's also the analytical side of the house where um, just as you have that empathy driven approach, you need to have the data rigorous analytics approach. And then when you marry the two, that's when you're very successful.
So if you think about the way that an organization starts up, there's going to be certain points. So it starts off with a founder, and what that founder does is that they go out and sell to their network. And what they do is, because they want to, they're going to win business, they're going to basically take anybody that pretty much buys. So at that point, they may not be solving the problem they think they're solving, because really it's their mates buying their product. And then they go through a process where they get probably their first salesperson, or they start moving out of that circle. They've got to kind of move out, punch out of their network and sell elsewhere. What should founders be doing as they go through that process in terms of understanding the category and working on that?
Yeah, so making sure that their narrative, whether it's to networks, friends, etc., is aligned with the go-to-market narrative. I think that's something that happens. There's a schism between what the founder is saying, what sometimes the CEO, the CMO. You want to make sure everybody is on brand, on message. And what we do at my organization is we actually have everybody in the organization do a pitch, and we watch it and
Okay.
we give them feedback. And that's a really good way. And maybe in those sessions, somebody is doing something that's just blowing your mind and everybody's sort of glued to the screen. So then maybe we adjust that master pitch to reflect the one that's winning. So it's an iterative process, and it's something that you shouldn't just do once. Like, you do this pitch exercise, do it in 3 months, do it in 6 months. And it's fun. You can make it like a lunch and learn. Everybody just, give everybody free lunch and watch do pitches. However your organization's culture is, you can make it into something that people don't dread, but appreciate as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, because in the book,
hard.
in the book Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, which is a great book about, because he started Pixar. But it's also a great book as well because of the fact that Steve Jobs was on the board. So you get two books in one. One is a book about Pixar, and one is a book about Steve Jobs. And what he does is he talks about the creativity process of creating the Pixar movies, and how they would have this meeting where everybody would go along, and the job was of the creative team to pitch the story, and for everybody else to go, I didn't get that bit. So one of the films he talks about is what Finding Nemo, and the process they went from, in terms of this is what the original story was and people didn't get it, and how they basically went through that meeting process. I can't remember what they call the meeting, to it being what it is and what we know it is for today.
Yeah, that's the best way to test your message, right? Is like put it in front of an audience. And yeah, Finding Nemo, interesting fact is that the father fish would have turned into a mother fish because clownfish are hermaphroditic. So so that was just like some random thing I learned. I did not know that. My son taught me that.
Yeah, but I think that's a really important. It's a really important thing to ask the audience and kind of have that opportunity to explore stuff. So Tim and I have worked together for 8 years now, and kind of when one of us does something, like we deliver a presentation or we do a pitch or we speak at an event or whatever, we get that was really good, well done bit over and done with, and then we focus on and then these are the bits that the audience didn't like, that they didn't understand, that you didn't deliver as well as you could have done, and focus on those bits. Because absolutely, it's not about pointing and criticizing, but it absolutely is about saying these are the areas where there is room for improvement, so go and improve them, kind of thing. And I think that often organizations, there is a culture where you're vilified for making mistakes, isn't there? If something isn't as good as it could be, or as good as you can make it, it's like, well, that's a crime almost. And I think that in order to kind of carve the niche, you need to have that kind of, there's no such thing as a wrong answer attitude, don't you?
Absolutely. And I think so much of this boils down to leadership too, and doing the hard work there. I did a wonderful leadership program through Next Gen Center. It from everything from conflict resolution to how not to give compliment sandwiches, the art of giving and receiving feedback. Everyone, I believe, should be well versed in those what softer skills because it's necessary to do the more technical, the more creative skills. But yeah, I think there is this culture of you're wrong, I'm going to get fired, this fear, right? I think it's also in this cycle where there's a lot of layoffs. People are very afraid of being wrong and they're playing safe. And that doesn't ultimately serve the organization in the long run as people chip at their market share. So, like you said, it's an opportunity to learn to do better. And I'd even add is so you have people of different seniority experience. How can we make this better together? Ask people in a room for their feedback of like, okay, this part of the presentation didn't land as well. What can we do to fix it? So that everybody hears the solution set and then can apply it themselves. It's sort of like teaching rather than directing.
You can't really create a category and play it safe simultaneously, can you?
Correct. It's tough. You can't straddle the line. It's either you just have to rip the band-aid. It's tough, but I look at it this way. Okay, you hold on to whatever you're doing for like another year, another 2 years. Then what? You're in exactly the same position and you're behind. So sometimes facing the hard truths and postponing them is just as problematic as ignoring them.
It was interesting you were talking about the pitch contest earlier.
Yeah.
Not the pitch contest, but the pitch training.
Yeah.
And because in a very similar way to what you were explaining, listening to customers, talking to customers, asking the right questions. I've experienced that actually asking your employees to build their own pitch, can be quite interesting as well, and sometimes much better than well, maybe much better. I don't know, but at least great ideas can arise from that type of exercise.
Absolutely.
Well, it's crowdsourcing, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I use AI too now. So I actually create what I call AI personas and I have them test my pitch. So I say, this person is in my ICP, is a skeptic, is really angry, blah, 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 whatever the type of personas I come against. And I'm like, what would be the questions they ask? What would be their criticisms? And then I do it for the champion. What would the champion say? And then so I basically have the AI layer, the customer layer, the internal layer, and then the truth lies in sifting all of that data and making it actionable. But AI has some tremendous applications for objection handling, teaching sales how to do that better if they're in a time crunch and they need to prepare. So I work on a lot of prompts like that for sales enablement.
So typically, what does one of those prompts look like? So we've all
Yeah.
dabbled with Chat GPT and whatever other tools, and I'm speaking for myself here. I can see that it has fantastic possibilities and applications, but none of them for me as things currently stand. So change my mind. I'm about to pitch something to a customer, and I think the customer is not in a place, or there's somebody in there that's likely to be a detractor from this. How do I get some prep work for that in?
Sure. So I would type out like I'm a long prompt. I don't write like prompts. I write how I speak or how I would write to a friend. So I say, okay, this is the situation. I am doing this at this kind of company. This is my objective. This is what I'm selling. Give a description. And then I'd say, this is the person that I'm selling to, their characteristics, like kind of a character portrait or an analysis. And this is where that writing background comes in. And then I'd say, give me a list of conventional, unconventional objections they would have. Give me a list of questions that they would have around a specific feature. And then I see what AI spits out. And then based on that prompt, I'll say in the like a multi-thread prompt, I'll ask it follow-up questions. Okay, great. And now I'm also selling to an IT person along with this sort of bombastic character. This character is like this. What questions would they have? So I prep myself by trying to come up with questions that maybe alone I wouldn't think of. And that's what I use the AI for primarily.
Brilliant.
Leah,
It
this has
works with
been great.
anything. Yeah.
How can people get to know more? How can they connect with you?
You can send me a DM on LinkedIn, add me as a connection. I'm super friendly. I'm also Broke Girl Branding on Instagram. I have little AI tips and show my life in upstate Saratoga, New York. And yeah, so those would be the two primary methods, LinkedIn and Instagram.
Fantastic. And if you have something to say, we want to hear from you. Scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live and fill out the Be Our Guest application form. On behalf of the panelists, to our guest, to our audience, thank you all.